Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. If we have any visitors here who don't know me, my name is Dr. Philip Phillips, and I'm the Associate Dean of the Honors College. We have Dr. John Weil, Dean of the Honors College, here with us today, and Ms. Laura Clifford, who is in charge of our Undergraduate Fellowships Office and our is advisor to our Buchanan Fellows. I'm very excited today to introduce our speaker. Tandra Martin is a higher education senior associate at Huron Consulting Group. She has considerable experience in the education sector that includes higher education, state government, K through 16 policy, and international education policy. Prior to her current role, Tandra served as program manager under the Vice Provost for Academic Affairs at Vanderbilt University, worked in student affairs at Vanderbilt, and was director of post-secondary coordination and alignment at the Tennessee Department of Education. Her areas of professional expertise include program and project management, diversity, equity and inclusion, strategic planning, and organizational transformation, to name only a few. Tandra earned her MA in Leadership and Public Policy at Lipscomb University and her Bachelor of Science in International Relations here at Middle Tennessee State University, where she was one of our Buchanan Fellows. Tandra took advantage of some of those opportunities mentioned to you previously by Colin McDonald, opportunities offered by the Undergraduate Fellowships Office, which you're going to learn more about next week, and applied successfully to be a Fulbright Scholar in South Africa and a Boren Scholar in Morocco. Those experiences expanded her knowledge of international education through cultural immersion. Tandra was also our first and only Rhodes finalist to date, so we're still looking for someone to apply successfully for the Rhodes. She continues to support our college and our students by serving on our Board of Visitors and by accepting my invitation to speak today. Tandra's work is rooted in her belief that education, when done well, can radically and practically change our world, and I believe that. Please join me in welcoming Tandra.
Thanks for that introduction. I was whispering to Ms. Clifford, I forgot writing that, but that's the bio that I gave them for the board. So I'm really excited to be here with you all today. And that quote at the end of my bio is something that I live by and I really believe in. And I think the Honors College is a really good example of education done well. And so I'm just going to talk to you a little bit today about my story and my experience. Before we got started, I was like, I'm starting to feel really old. I graduated 8 years ago, so even like going through the process of reflecting on my time at MTSU and at the Honors College, I was like, ooh, I have to get the sequence right and go back and sort of relive it. So I'm excited to be here with y'all today. How are y'all doing? You okay? Yeah, I know it's a gloomy day. It's Monday afternoon. I'm probably like the last thing on your schedule. So hopefully it'll be a little fun and a little interesting. So I'll sort of like, I always like to know kind of where we're going, and as I was typing this, I thought, I kind of need like a Drake intro, like starting from the bottom, now we're here. But sort of 3 sections for what I'll talk about today. Sort of how it started, how I got here to MTSU and the Honors College, how it went. That'll be the bulk of what we talk about. Dr. Phillips sort of gave you a preview of some of the things that I did in my time here. And then we'll sort of end with why it matters, and hopefully throughout the discussion today, there will be a couple of nuggets that you can take with you and sort of build your own story and your own experience. I think the beauty of the Honors College celebrating 50 years is my story is just one small piece of that. Each one of you will play your own role in the history of the Honors College in 25 years or 50 years. One day you might get a call from Dr. Phillips that says, hey, can you come give a lecture? So very excited to be here with y'all. And let's get into it. So my story to MTSU and to the Honors College actually started with a no. Those folks on that wall have heard this story before, but I am from Murfreesboro, so both sides of my family, lifelong residents of Murfreesboro. If you're familiar with the area, My dad's family lives sort of in the Walter Hill area. My mom's family lives in like West Cassis, Milton. So born and raised here, went to Oakland High School just down the street, was an IB student there. And, you know, it's kind of weird that we ask like 17, 18-year-olds to like plan out their whole life when our prefrontal cortex isn't fully developed. But for me, and that sort of pre-development, my college sort of approach was I was going to go exactly where I wanted to go, which for me was NYU to study international business, or I was going to go where I could make the most money. And that's just being very transparent. It was sort of like this very black and white, all or nothing sort of experience for me. And my senior year, I spent many a lunch break sitting in computer labs applying for scholarships because I knew NYU was my goal. But I also knew that my family wasn't going to be able to bankroll me. Like, it's not my story. And so I applied early decision to NYU, got accepted. I was so excited. I was like, yay, we did it. We're there. But I had a school counselor at Oakland, Missy Blizzard, who I think might still be there. She was like, hey, there's this opportunity at MTSU, and I know Colin's lecture was about opportunities, but there's a scholarship at the Honors College. I think you should apply. Like, I know you're one-track mind at NYU, but like, let's just do this just in case. And thankfully I listened to her. So I applied to be a Buchanan scholar, but once I got that acceptance at NYU, I was like, nope, I know where I'm going. And so as the deadline approached, I emailed, I think it was Dean Carnicum at the time, was that right, Dr. Rob?
Right.
And I said, like, thank you for the opportunity, but I don't think I'm gonna come to MTSU. And I'm an only child, so talking to my parents about the decision, and I grew up in a really small house, like 2-bedroom, like my parents' bedroom was right next to mine. And they were having this really hard conversation about finances, right? Like, we had done this really cool college visit, we'd been to New York, the 3 of us, it was great. My mom was like, we'll refinance the house, like, we'll make this happen. My dad was like, there's no way. And so with like tears in my eyes, I walk into the other room and I say, like, we don't have to have this discussion. I'll like call MTSU and see if I can go to the Honors College. So the very next day, I think at that time, I don't know if they'll still do like paper forms, but we had to like physically sign to decline, and I hadn't done that part yet. And so I think the deadline was probably like a 4:30 on, say, a Friday. And I left Oakland early to like rush my paperwork over here. Dean Carnicum, he said, if you can get it to me by like end of day, like we'll take you back. And so that's how I got here. And so I'm really grateful to the Honors College for one, extending me the grace and the opportunity even after I said no. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions of my life. I feel very strongly that I wouldn't be the person that I am today had I gone to NYU. And I definitely wouldn't be the person I am today had I not experienced the things that I did at MTSU, and particularly in the Honors College. So one thing that I do want to start, and I think it's really important to acknowledge what we all bring to a space. And for me, as I was thinking about this, and we touched on it a bit, is personal histories really do become generational legacies. Also, there are a lot of pictures in here, so don't judge me. I hope this is a judgment-free zone, but college was a long time ago for me. So quality is not always the best, and you know, I changed a little bit. But this first picture up here is actually my grandfather. And like looking back on this moment, I don't think I realized the importance and sort of the magnitude. But a little bit about my grandfather. So he had to stop going to school in 2nd grade. He was pulled out of school so that he could work and help support the family. So he can't read, he can't write. In a lot of ways, he can really just sign his name. And that was me on movement day. If you can't tell, you can tell how old it was and how long ago it was because of this like crisscross picture situation happening. But I moved into the honors dorm, and my granddad actually retired from MTSU as a janitor, and that was a dorm he used to clean. And so I have this one distinct memory, and it had to have been over a summer because I didn't really understand what a janitor was, and he brought me to work with him like overnight. So like no students were there, And I think there was a Summer Olympics happening, and so I just remember very distinctly like the smell of ammonia and like him cleaning rooms. And so to think that, you know, just one generation between us, that he got to move me in to go to college was really, really special. Quite literally on the floors that he used to clean. And then the other picture is my parents. So my dad actually also works here. He works in creative services, and that's my mom kind of in the corner. But, you know, they kind of got stuck with this crazy kid. I'm their only child. Who's like a little weird, a little nerdy, who moved across the world several times. But they've always been really supportive of me and my dreams and what I wanted to do. And so just wanted to acknowledge that this is my story. This is what I brought to MTSU for my 4 years. And thankfully, those folks on the wall and others took me as I was and said, here, like, we're here to help you flourish. We're here to help you grow. And I know that they will do the same thing for you as well. So let's sort of pivot, I guess, to a little exercise. I'm not going to make you share out or anything, but I know that the title of my lecture was sort of designing your MTSU story. And so I don't know where you all are in your journey. You might be a first year, you might be in your last year, like counting down the days until you walk across the stage. But if you had to create an MTSU bucket list, either for the time you have left, or if you want to use this as a reflection exercise for what you've done while you've been here, what would you put on that list? And so I've added some additional sort of prompting questions, but we'll take a couple minutes just for you to sort of reflect and think about what you might want to do in your time here. Give you like 60 more seconds. I see lots of faces looking back up at me, so we'll keep going. Like I said, I'm not going to ask you to share out, but I think just keep your list in mind as I sort of share my experiences and some of my lessons learned, and you know, see if there are any nuggets that you can take and apply to what you've put on your list. So if I had done the same thing right when I got to MTSU, this is what my list would have looked like. It's real short and sweet, because I didn't plan on being here very long. I wanted to get my general education list out of the way. I wanted to keep a 4.0 GPA. It probably resonates with many of you. It's not that crucial, y'all, I promise. Make a B. Like, no one looks at your GPA after you graduate. And then that third line was, I was getting out of here and I was going to my dream school. I was going to go to NYU. I did think I wanted to study abroad. And then if you'd asked me what my dream job was, it would have been to join the U.S. Foreign Service. So that was sort of my guidepost, again, as an 18-year-old right out of high school. And my list kind of ended up looking something like this. So it's much bigger, things that I didn't even know were a possibility. And this is sort of how it shaped out for me. So I was a student ambassador. I joined a sorority in my first semester. I studied abroad 3 different times. I went to Costa Rica and Israel in the same summer, and then went to Morocco. Studied a couple languages, obviously completed my honors thesis. Went to DC. I went to several cities for different opportunities, and then sort of at the end did a couple of fellowship opportunities. So I'm going to share a little bit more in detail about some of these opportunities and what I did and what I learned there. But this is just a really clear example of, sometimes like we can have the perfectly laid plan and things don't always turn out that way. So I was really only on campus for like 2.5 years. So after the first semester of my junior year, I didn't come back to campus until like the week of graduation. But as you can see, just a couple of examples. So I'm at Nady Pi. That was my big sister. She was actually also a Buchanan Fellow in the Honors College. And then the 2 pictures on either side are from my time as a student ambassador. And so, even though initially I didn't plan to stay here, I still wanted to have what I considered, a social life. And I think, even being in the Honors College, I think it was the first time that I really got to embrace just being a multifaceted individual, right? Like, when I came here, Dean Vial, Ms. Clifford, they didn't say you have to be one thing, you have to be one way. But I was really able to flourish and be who I wanted to be across campus, be an academic in the Honors College, but also have a lot of fun and be involved and do SGA and be a student ambassador. And I'm really thankful for really those first 2 solid years of those opportunities and what I was able to do. Through being a student ambassador, I got to meet Dr. McPhee and develop a really close relationship with him. And through my sorority, I think, got to start taking things a little less seriously in some ways. Like, you're here to have fun, right? Like, I think sometimes you can come to college and think, like, I just have to get a piece of paper, I just have to get the degree. But whatever fun means to you, and that experience really helped me come out of my shell quite a bit. And so I'm really, really thankful for those experiences and really just the fun that I got to have while I was in college. But, so as I mentioned, I was really only on campus for 2.5 years. So it was about 5 semesters and sort of came to another pivot point for me. In a lot of ways, people expected me to become the president of my sorority. And I had to make a really hard decision. I knew I had these like really ambitious goals, wanted to be in the international relations sphere, and basically the choice was choose to become president of your sorority or choose to go to Washington, D.C. And another mentor, outside of the Honors College, but through one of my involvement, we just had a conversation, and I think she really helped me see like how something like this could set me up for the rest of my life and was a risk in a lot of ways, right? Like, I was comfortable here at MTSU. I was ready to stay. Like, NYU was nowhere on like my plans anymore. I was really, really comfortable. I had built a network, and I'm sure things would have been great. But this sort of pivot point for me really set me on a trajectory for the rest of my time in college. And it was the first time that I had to, like, no one else could make this decision for me, right? It was just me. But it ended up paying dividends. And so I don't know if this is still a partnership that we have, but this was through the Washington Center. And typically what happens is you apply to the Washington Center, you tell them your interest, and they match you to an internship placement. But I, who I am, was like, no, your internships aren't good enough for me. Like, I'm gonna go find my own internship, which was an option, but not a lot of students did it, because that was kind of the point. Like, you apply to the center and they like match you with someone. So I was applying to think tanks. I applied to the Council on Foreign Relations, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is where I ended up interning. And I applied in the space of like media and communication. So at that time I hadn't settled on a region. I really still wanted to be a generalist, and this would touch all areas of the world. And so it's a really bad picture, but you can kind of see like we had to set up multiple cameras and record and like post all of the videos online. So that's a panel with Bob Schieffer. Y'all probably don't know who that is, but they do. They're like nodding their heads. And that's a picture of one of the screens. I distinctly remember this roundtable discussion. So for those of you who might not be able to see, it was with the Deputy Secretary of State at the time, but it was about the Middle East. And so you walked into like the largest event space, and there was like gold flecks on the food because it's the Middle East, and this particular area of the think tank had lots of money. I was just like, what alternate universe have I entered into? But I had zero experience in media, communications, camera work. And I remember having a call with the person who ended up being my boss and actually wrote one of my letters of recommendation for the roads. And basically my message to her was, listen, I know I come from MTSU. I know you like don't know me from anyone, but I promise you that I will put in the work to like learn what I have to learn even before I get there. Because of being a student ambassador, I worked with MTSU's media and communications team. I was like, listen, I will go to Rob Jansen. I will have him teach me how to set up a camera. And she was like, okay. And she gave me that opportunity. And so I think that was my first like really distinct memory of really having to exercise self-advocacy, right? Like, I know, like, I don't come from this big name school. I know that, like, I'm coming from Tennessee. I don't have the experience that you're looking for, but I'm willing to work hard and learn. And she gave me that opportunity. And so it was really, really cool. I got there and set up a program to help other interns that were coming after me. But then the other really great thing about this is I made one of my very best friends. So the person on the right of the screen, she's, to this day, she lived across the hall from me at the Washington Center Apartments, and I'm going to be at her bachelorette in like April and at her wedding in May. And so even though like you might build relationships here while you're on campus, even through the opportunities that you have, you still might make some of your lifelong friends. And you might not think about it in this way, but you're also expanding MTSU's network when you meet people from all around the country and have these really incredible opportunities. So that's sort of the story of DC. And after DC, I think I was like in the middle of the semester, I get an email, and we were talking about this, Ms. Clifford, before we started, but I had applied for a public policy and international affairs fellowship, I think before I went to DC, but I found out that I got accepted while I was there. And so if you're tracking timeline, I was in DC the spring semester of my junior year. And then I think I came home for like a week and a half, packed my bags, and then flew to Pittsburgh for an 8-week program to take graduate courses in public policy and international affairs. And I think if I was to describe, so I think DC was, I felt very much like I had to prove myself. When I got to Pittsburgh and to Carnegie Mellon, I think I had this feeling of like, okay, I'm here, but I don't know if I'm cut out for it, right? So I think I had some of that imposter syndrome. And so here's a picture of our cohort, and I'll just throw out some of the names of schools that these folks attended, and I'm sure they'll be really recognizable. So we had a couple folks from Stanford, UC Berkeley, Georgetown, Columbia, Howard, NDC. There was a guy from the University of Florida. And so, you know, one of the first things you do when you get in these cohort programs, it's like, you introduce yourself and you say, oh, I'm so-and-so and I go to this school. And so that I'm here in this room with like 19 other students. And I go, hi, I'm Tandra. I go to Middle Tennessee State University. Everyone kind of looks at me like, what? Where is that? And I was like, Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And they were like, I'm sorry, what? It's like, it's close to Nashville, right? And so like that's sort of how you have to like iterate people or orient people to MTSU. And so even through this experience, we were taking, I think it was 4 graduate level courses over a period of 8 weeks. I was very thankful for the Buchanan economics class because we had to take an economics class, and it would have been awful had I not had that. But this experience also, it was the first time I had rode a city bus. And I know that sounds really weird to say, but we drive everywhere here, right? But like these folks who like grew up in big cities, they were just like hopping on the bus and it was like, I'm sorry, what are you doing? It was my first time in a Trader Joe's, which I'm so thankful for my friend Jai who introduced me to Trader Joe's. But it was a lot of firsts for me. And it was also, I think, when I proved to myself that I did belong in those spaces and those places. And I distinctly remember a conversation with one of the faculty members. I think I had gotten in my head about how I was doing in the classes, what my performance was, and so I went to her office hours. And I don't know that I had ever been to office hours here at MTSU, but I went to her office hours and I was like, I just want to make sure I'm like meeting expectations, and she told me to relax. She was like, I know you're like, I can see that you're like physically stressed and worried. And she was like, you're in the top 3 of this cohort. You are fine. And so sometimes it takes another person from the outside seeing something in you that you don't see in yourself. But that was like a moment of validation for me. Again, I rarely walk into a room and think I'm the smartest person, but I probably will outwork you, right? And I feel really strongly about that. And just having her speak into me in that moment, like the student that she had really only known for a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks, was like a really, I think, transformational period for me in my growth and development. Whereas DC, I felt like I was still having to prove myself. When I got here, I felt like, no, I actually belong and can take up space in these places. And so that's, just something for you to think through. Like, I think we all have moments of self-doubt. We all probably suffer to some degree from some imposter syndrome. But if you get to a place and you're willing to work hard, like you deserve to be there and you should be there. So this was the summer before my senior year. And because I came to MTSU with this plan to like get out, I kind of front loaded my classes. And I think this was the first thing that Ms. Clifford and I really, really worked on together. And that was the Boren Scholarship to Morocco. So I mentioned that I studied abroad 3 times. One of the places I went after my sophomore year was Israel. And it really sparked an interest for me in the Middle East. And so that first semester of my junior year, I took like the first entry-level Arabic class. And then I decided, you know what? I'm going to have a lot of space in my schedule, so I'm going to apply to study Arabic for a year somewhere. And at the time, I was in Morocco in 2014, 2015. For a safety perspective, there were really only 3 places universities would approve you to go: Morocco, Jordan, and the UAE. And with finances, I wasn't going to go into debt to go, and so the program that I found that the board would cover was in Morocco. And so I think I also found out about this while I was in DC, that I had gotten accepted, and I spent my entire senior year in Morocco, which is kind of cool. But also, I had never been away from home that long. I had been abroad before, but this was like a whole academic year. This was the year I spent my first Christmas by myself, because I was like, I'm not coming home and then going all the way back. And I remember getting off the plane in Casablanca and meeting all of the other students who were mostly only there for a semester. There were 2 other students who were staying for the full year, and they're speaking French, and they've been taking Arabic for years, and I was like, oh boy, what have I done? I don't speak a lick of French, and I have 1 semester of college Arabic under my belt. But this turned out to be one of the single best experiences that I could have ever had. And this was the year I completed my undergraduate thesis. So I did a creative project on women's and girls' access to education in the Middle East and North Africa. And a lot of that work was rooted with those folks in that far right corner. So while I was there, I interned with a women's rights organization and sort of set up some infrastructure for women to learn trade skills, if you will, to bring income into their families, and that's what I wrote about in my thesis. That bottom right picture was like our final dinner for introductory Arabic. My teachers, like in the middle, we called him Baba Hamid, which is like Father Hamid. He was just really, really gracious, really, really kind. My mom's first time out of the U.S. was actually to visit me in Morocco. She came with my aunt, and we started in Morocco and did some traveling to Spain and France. We were going to get back really, really late, and he was like, I'll come pick you up from the airport. And I was like, you don't have to do that, like that's really kind. He was like, no, one, I want to meet your mother, but it's too late, like you don't need to be getting in a random taxi. And so for me, Moroccan hospitality is something that I really took away from that experience. You know, like growing up in the South, like we think we're hospitable, but Moroccans really, really put us to shame. And so this was my supervisor, if you will, at the nonprofit I worked at. There's this like big culture of what we call couscous Fridays. And so we're making couscous in that middle picture. This actually is also another really special memory. So I lived in an apartment since I was there for so long, and we had a housekeeper who would come and like clean our apartment and also cook all of our meals. And so a lot of students, pro tip, if you will, a lot of students who don't want to spend the money to go to Europe, they go to Morocco because it's really, really close. And so the very first break that we got, it was over the Eid holiday. Most students went to Spain. And I was like, why would I go to Spain when like the whole country is about to celebrate this really important holiday? And so she actually invited me to spend it with her family for the weekend. And I like slept on this couch right here, had to use a Turkish toilet. I'll spare you from the details, but it was a good time. And because I thought, right, like I was only going to be there for a night, but I ended up staying for like 3 days, and I was like, oh boy, this is a whole experience. But I'm very, very thankful that I made the choice to not go to Spain, like not go to Granada and stay in the country to celebrate Eid. That was a picture from my first day of class at our study center, and then in the Sahara Desert with my MTSU sweatshirt on. So really, really thankful for this experience, and I'm sure they would kind of give me the side eye if I didn't talk about this. But also while I was in Morocco, the Honors College was really gracious enough to fly me home for my Rhodes interview. So in my intro, Dr. Phillips talked about me being a finalist for the Rhodes. I spent a lot of time with Ms. Clifford on this application, like planning for it. They didn't touch it from a writing perspective, which was really nerve-wracking for me, because in full transparency, I wasn't a great writer in undergrad. It's something, becoming a good writer was something that I really, really, really had to work at. And with Rhodes, there was this like strict hard line that no one could edit, no one could help you write. And so after talking through like the materials, like it was on me to make sure that it was quality. But it was actually probably about this time that year. I think usually the interviews are in November. And so I flew back from Morocco, met my parents here, drove up to St. Louis, and interviewed for the Rhodes Scholarship for District 12. And I think at the time, if you were to have asked me like right when I graduated, like what my biggest failure was, I would have said like not winning the Rhodes, right? Because I think in those moments you feel like you're standing on the shoulders of all of the people who have helped you get to that moment, right? Like I recognize that I wasn't there by my own doing, and I really, really, really wanted to do that for the Honors College and for MTSU. But you know, hindsight is 20/20, and had I not missed out on that opportunity, I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go to South Africa and do my Fulbright.